The United Nations at 80. Can it avert global war? Is today's three unresolved conflicts tomorrow's World War III? In 2025, the United Nations turns 80, a milestone that invites critical reflection on its achievements and its failures. Founded to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, as proclaimed in its charter, the United Nations faces an era of unprecedented geopolitical tensions and unresolved conflicts and wars that dominate news agendas. At least 3 regions are on the brink of escalation into global warfare. Meanwhile, skepticism grows about the United Nations' ability to maintain peace, justice, and order. Has the UN outlived its purpose, or does it still have a critical role in averting catastrophe? This post outlines the 3 major unresolved conflicts that could lead to World War III. The inability of the UN to resolve these conflicts and wars in the context of evaluating UN's performance over the past 80 years, and explores potential reforms to revive the UN's mandate and alternatives to the UN itself. So, what are the 3 unresolved conflicts that could trigger World War III? The first is the Taiwan Straits and Taiwan, and the US-China rivalry in the region. The Taiwan Straits is a continuing flashpoint of escalating tensions between 2 dominant powers, China and the United States. China considers Taiwan a breakaway province, which has not ruled out force to claim it, while the US has committed to defending Taiwan under the Taiwan Relations Act. The second is the Russia-Ukraine war. The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine has destabilized Europe and its energy supplies. NATO's expansion and involvement, according to Russia, in the region, and Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and full-scale invasion in 2022 risks direct confrontation between nuclear powers, heightening fears of global escalation. And then there is Israel-Palestine war. This decades-long war and conflict remains unresolved, with recent escalations involving displacement of millions of people, rocket attacks, hostage-taking, increased settler violence, and aggressive military operations in occupied Gaza, remaining a source of deep division between states and people. This regional conflict and war is always on the brink of erupting into global conflict, drawing in regional states and people pitted against US-led forces in support of its long-term ally. The common elements of these 3 unresolved conflicts and wars, and why they have the potential to bring about World War III, are the involvement of superpowers, competing claims over the ownership of territory and sovereignty, and competing claims of who is and who is not acting in self-defense. In the context of these 3 and other conflicts and wars, the UN's shortcomings are stark and for all to see. The UN Security Council's paralysis and the use of veto powers of the permanent 5 members has often rendered the Council ineffective, as seen in Palestine, Syria, Myanmar, and Ukraine. The UN inaction on genocide often leaves the UN as a bystander, as lands are flattened and people are left without hope and left unburied. Over the decades, the failure to prevent genocides in Rwanda, Bosnia, Darfur, and more recently, as claimed in Gaza, highlights the UN's inability to act decisively. But probably the United Nations' greatest failure, with its perceived biases and inaction, in my view, is this: the erosion of trust among member states and many people in civil society as a credible organization to bring about peace, justice, and security. As the UN celebrates 80 years, its greatest critics argue that the UN no longer is capable, if ever it was, to maintain peace, justice, and order due to outdated structures. The permanent member 5 structure reflects post-World War II geopolitics, not today's realities. A lack of enforcement power. The UN relies on member states to implement resolutions, leading to inconsistent applications of international law. And resource constraints. Chronic underfunding undermines its operational capacity. But it should not be forgotten, and it would be unfair to suggest it has all been doom and gloom for the United Nations. Supporters of the UN over the 8 decades still believe the UN has played and still can play a vital role today, to be a multilateral forum and global platform for dialogue and negotiation and diplomacy, to be a norm setting of global human rights standards. The UN establishes norms that shape states' behavior, even if its enforcement is uneven, and to be the principal organ for the delivery of humanitarian aid. Agencies like UNICEF and UNHCR provide critical support to millions of people worldwide. But the question is, can the UN be a pathway to reviving peace and order and to solve those unresolved conflicts and wars that could escalate to World War III? To avert war and conflict engulfing parts of the world, I think everyone agrees urgent change is needed, if not in, outside the UN. Some proposed changes being argued include, and 5 are mentioned here. 1. Reforming the Security Council, expanding the Security Council to include permanent members from Africa, Latin America, and South Asia could make it more representative. However, achieving consensus among the current permanent 5 members to include new permanent members is a seemingly insurmountable challenge. 2. Creating a United Nations army. A standing UN military force could respond rapidly to crises, reducing reliance on ad hoc coalitions. But legal and logistical hurdles, including concerns about state sovereignty, make this proposal contentious, but potentially transformative. 3. Strengthening international law. Enhanced mechanisms to enforce international legal rulings, such as automatic sanctions for non-compliance, could deter violations. Greater integration between the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, with the Security Council for many is essential. 4. Promoting preventative diplomacy, investing in conflict prevention through early warning systems and mediation efforts aligned with UN's original vision under Article 33 of the Charter. And 5. Alternative structures. If the UN is unable to achieve peace and security, regional organizations will need to be developed, or those like the African Union, which already exists, may need to play a greater role to maintain peace, justice, and order. The empowering of regional bodies while maintaining global oversight might offer a more agile approach to conflict resolution, but then it may come to compete with the United Nations and those 5 permanent member states. In conclusion, as the UN marks 80 years, it stands at a crossroads. Its achievements in promoting peace and human rights in certain places at certain times are undeniable, but its failures to prevent conflicts and enforce international law are also undeniable and have for many eroded its credibility. Populations who suffer from war in the world are becoming increasingly disillusioned with an institution that they see as ineffective and outdated. This is the year of the UN, a time of reflection and renewal and change. Whether through structural reform, new enforcement mechanisms, or an alternative framework, the international community must act decisively to restore faith in some form of multilateralism, a togetherness of people in a shared vision underpinned by shared values. As the UN celebrates 80 years in 2025, be no doubt it is on trial and the stakes have never been higher. Is today's 3 unresolved conflicts tomorrow's World War III? Can the UN bring about peace and justice? Thank you for watching. Feel free to comment and subscribe for more.